When you hear Studio Trigger is making an anime, you think, how the fuck did we end up in space again? But never have I thought, damn, that shit looks scrumptious. Okay, maybe once or twice, but I never thought it would be about food, and that's where Dungeon Meshi comes into play. And no, I'm not calling it delicious in dungeon, cause that sounds fucking stupid. Now originally, Alan and I had no intentions of watching this because cooking anime typically aren't that great. If I wanted to watch some cooking, I would just watch Kitchen Nightmares with my boy Gordon Ramsay, because that man is roasting these restaurant owners alive.
Is there anything else you wanted me to get for you, or?
A wheel for that bike out there. That way I can get the fuck out.
But with a studio like Trigger producing a show like this, we just had to give it a chance. Holy shit. That was the intro to a cooking show? After being teleported out of the dungeon by Fallon, Laos, Marcel, and Chochuk find themselves on the surface with no food, no supplies, and 2 less party members after they both put in their 3-second notices. Simply put, they're fucked. But the 3 of them aren't about to just leave their precious friend to be digested by a dragon. No, these guys are ride or die. They'll do anything to rescue their comrade. Beggars can't be choosers, so they reluctantly try eating this little mushroom monster and a scorpion. You see this blonde hair on the top of Laos' head though? If I had to guess, he's probably white. And we all know what happens when white people cook food.
It's time to make white people chicken. First, you're going to need none of these.
I could be being a bit racist, so let's see how this pans out. That's what I thought. Lacking the knowledge in any sort of flavor, there was no way they were ever going to survive the dungeon on just water and boiled meats. Which is when a man named Senshi steps in, flames their shit cooking, and decides to try his own hand at it. And I'll let you guys in on a little secret. He's part Chinese. Senshi has been researching the ecosystem of the dungeon for 10 years, limit testing what can and can't be eaten, how to prepare them, and what dishes he can whip up with what he has. Being part Chinese, he'll utilize damn near anything. Bugs, slimes, tree roots, fruits from man-eating plants, you name it. At first, everyone was skeptical of his dishes. I mean, I would be too if a random Chinese guy told me drinking the white liquid from squeezing a cow's stomach had health benefits.
We did something bad, cousin.
But after giving his cooking a try, it's not that bad. In fact, they would go so far as to say it's actually good. So they recruit Senshi on their journey, and the 4 of them explore different cuisines as they go deeper and deeper into the dungeon to rescue their last party member.
While it might seem like the focus of this anime is the food, the world building is what really brings Dungeon Meshi to life. There's a story to be told about the monsters they eat, and every single one of them has careful thought put into their anatomy, which reflects animals we have in the real world. And all that plays into the bigger picture that is the dungeon's ecosystem. It's actually genius. Even big dum-dums like us can easily understand that you eat food, you shit out food, and then nature takes care of the rest. And rather than going out of the way to try to explain the dungeon's mysteries to you through a beginner's exposition dump, the show instead feeds you information about how the world operates through what's relevant in the storytelling. Take a look at this living armor. In other fantasy anime, it would be imbued with magic by a mage, and that's what makes them move. But here in Dungeon Meshi, the armor is actually being moved by little creatures in the body working together to act like muscles in a human. And that was when I realized this series is really different compared to other anime. The realism is probably my favorite part of the show because of how they make complex topics so approachable and easy to digest. Huh? Get it? Every single organism within the dungeon plays a part in the delicate ecosystem, which is perfectly balanced as it is. So adventurers have to be careful not to be greedy little fucks and only take what they need. Otherwise, they risk throwing that balance off and basically destroy the entire dungeon for everyone. But knowing this, you can actually utilize the dungeon to your advantage if you have the creativity.
What did he say?
You know, we were kidding when we said Senshi was part Chinese, but now I'm starting to believe he's not beating the allegations. This perfectly balanced ecosystem with limited resources is just a brilliant way of making the characters diversify what dishes they're making and how they're making it. And let me tell you guys, the food actually looks amazing. A lot of dishes they cook have their own distinct look to it because of the ingredients they use and don't look exactly like real world cuisines. Which is the problem you run into with a lot of fantasy cooking anime like Campfire Cooking in Another World. Now, we're not shitting on the show just because it was decent for being what felt like an ad for Amazon Fresh, but you can tell there's a huge gap between that and Dungeon Meshi. For being an isekai fantasy, there wasn't much creativity in the dishes because, let's face it, what's the difference between pork tonkatsu on Earth and orc meat tonkatsu in the isekai world? There isn't much. And that's exactly my problem with Chinese restaurants. Everything looks and tastes like chicken.
Teriyaki! The teriyaki chicken!
Okay.
Beyond the world building, monsters, and bomb-ass foods, the characters are what really sells the show. They're obviously fictional, but I swear I've met people like them in real life. Laos is the really nice guy whose heart is bigger than his brain. He's always got your back, but isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Senshi's the group's elder, the person you go to when you have personal problems or just want to vent because they have the most life experience and they give the best advice. Cheung is that chill friend who's a great person to be around as long as you don't bring up sensitive topics, like his height. And Marcel's that one girl that says she's down to eat whatever, yet turns down all the suggestions. Lying ass bitch. Individually, they're all great characters that feel like they have a mind of their own, and any of them could have been the main protagonist of the show, but grouping them together makes our dynamic and group atmosphere unshakable and unique as a cast. It's addicting to watch them joke and banter around with each other until shit gets serious, which makes them immediately switch to a more composed and careful manner, but after the danger is gone, they're back to shooting the shit. All of them genuinely feel like real people, and even their reactions to the dishes cooked feel genuine, unlike other food anime where they're practically creaming themselves at the sight of fried rice. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and preach to you guys that a Japanese cartoon has mastered facial expressions, but when they make it obvious that a character is intrigued yet disgusted and uncomfortable without saying a word, I think that's pretty impressive.
Dungeon Meshi is very different compared to the other anime Studio Trigger has worked on. It's weird. The animation is nothing to write home about, and some scenes make it feel like they hired a YouTube editor, but none of it feels out of place. It kind of all adds to this unserious vibe the anime gives off, especially once you realize they're taking their sweet ass time rescuing Fallon from the clutches of doom. Now, did you notice that I never once said in this video that Fallon is still alive? There's a lot of small details in the dialogue that you could easily miss if you blink too many times, but it certainly doesn't take anything away from the overall story. It just gives you a very surface level perspective on what Dungeon Meshi is about when these little hints indicate that there's so much more to the story than just the food they cook. I get it though. It's pretty difficult to read the subtitles when Marcel keeps making funny faces every episode. I have to admit, this show has 10 out of 10 comedy. It really reminds me of Konosuba with how chaotic it can be sometimes. Like in episode 2, there's this guy that got poisoned by a basilisk, and after it got defeated by Laios' party, Senshi decides he'd rather cook up the antidote instead of feeding it as is to the poor guy because it tastes better. Now, all the characters have their wacky and funny moments, but they also have their interpersonal character development, which kinda splits up the time between two completely different elements instead of honing in on one while putting the other in the back seat. It's understandable some people wouldn't like this, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's that big of a deal as long as the comedy stays peak.
What's wrong with you?
I thought I would be bored watching something like this, where all it seems like they're doing is cooking food. But surprisingly, Dungeon Meshi is pretty interesting. It's refreshing to see an anime put so much effort into building a world around an element so few others have considered an afterthought. Some people were even worried once they heard Studio Trigger was producing the show because their works aren't well known for the stories. But with Dungeon Meshi, they don't have to focus on that since the source material has it covered. And manga readers have reassured us time and time again that the story only gets better as it goes on. We just have to let it cook.